And a very happy day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tim Burgess, and I want to bring to you today the author's preface in Napoleon Hill's blockbuster, Think and Grow Rich. Now, this book literally, actually, it saved my life. It took me a long time to put all the pieces together of the whole puzzle, and why I even picked it up when I got the instruction. And, I received the instruction to get a copy of the book and read a little bit every day for the rest of my life. And I had wandered around for about 16 years, quit school in the 8th grade. I was going nowhere. But as I put all the pieces of the puzzle together, as I continued to study, now we're celebrating, we just completed 26 years. It was February 1996 that I received that instruction. Excuse me. And this book, literally, it fed myself and my brothers and sisters as kids. Dad left at a very young age. He sent absolutely no money. I'm not beating up on Dad. We're over it. Let go. They just let go of it, right? But there was no money. Mom didn't have enough money. She didn't earn enough money as a registered nurse who had been out of work, for all these years raising her children. She had 6 kids. And so where did the money come from? After Dad left and he sent no money, no child support, no nothing, where did the money come from? Well, as I had learned, it was this book that taught the success principles to a gentleman named W. Clement Stone. W. Clement Stone built a company called Combined Insurance Companies of America. There was a family named the McCabe family. Eddie McCabe was the one that was an executive vice president in some sort for Combined Insurance Companies of America. And the McCabe family, Agnes McCabe being one of them, they bought a lot of stock in Combined Insurance Companies of America before it really exploded. And it didn't really explode until W. Clement Stone got his hands on this book and started exercising these principles within the company. Now, one of the McCabes was our grandma, Agnes McCabe. That would be Grandma Llewellyn, as her married name would be. And so this book fed us as a child because Grandma had the money to forward to Mom so we could have food and keep the roof over our head and things like that. So as we think about this, and as I think about this, it reminds me that this book really did save my life. It fed me as a child. So it's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about helping you with this material, just completely bring simplicity to it. So you have an understanding of what Napoleon Hill's talking about. So we continue to study, continue to understand better, so we implement. Because I don't know anybody who implements anything if they don't understand it. So yesterday, we posted the publisher's preface. It's what the publisher felt about this book. And today I'd like to go through the author's preface. What does Napoleon Hill think about this book and this material? And he says, in every chapter of this book, mention has been made of the money-making secret, which has made fortunes for more than 500 exceedingly wealthy men whom I have carefully analyzed over a long period of years. So let's stop right there for a moment. Okay, first of all, we have a money-making secret, which made fortunes for more than 500 people, okay? Excuse me. So in every chapter, that money-making secret is there. So all we have to do is figure out what in every chapter is the common thread. And then we'll figure out the secret. But then he talks about whom I have carefully analyzed over a long period of years. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, but I haven't taken the time to carefully analyze anybody over a long period of years like he did. So until we can prove this material wrong, why don't we just go with it? Why don't we leave our own perceptions behind and just go with what Napoleon's going to talk about so we can enhance the quality of our life somewhere? I'm not saying you don't have a good quality of life now, but somewhere I'm sure you would like to grow or that part of your life get better. So he says the secret was brought to his attention by Andrew Carnegie more than a quarter century ago. Now, once again, this book was written in 1937, a quarter of a century ago, 25 years prior. And we have to understand Carnegie. If you don't know who Andrew Carnegie is, and some may not, it's okay. Carnegie was a Scottish immigrant, came to the United States in the mid-1800s, absolutely broke, no money at all, nothing. Scottish immigrant. He worked as a bobbin boy at one point in his life. He worked in the steel mills as a day laborer at one point in his life, but yet he became the wealthiest man in the world. So he knew something about creating and accumulating wealth. I think we can all agree on that. Now, I said wealth, I don't just mean money. However, let's make no mistake, the book was written for people who resent poverty. It used to be on the cover of the book. It was written in 1937, coming out of the Great Depression. But let's also understand poverty is not just money. You could be poverty-stricken. Yeah. You could have poverty in your relationships. You could have poverty in your bank account. You could have poverty in your health or your physical being. So it's not just money, okay? So the secret was brought to his attention by Carnegie more than a quarter of a century prior to the writing of this book. He says the Carnegie lovable old Scotsman kind of just tossed it into his mind without giving it a thought, and then sat back to see if Napoleon had brains enough to realize what Carnegie had tossed in there. Now, when Carnegie saw that he had grasped the idea, then he asked if Napoleon would be willing. Now, this is the part that I didn't understand for years. I get it now. He said, yes, if I would be willing to spend 20 years or more preparing myself to take it to the world, to men and women who, without the secret, might go through life as failures. 20 years of putting this philosophy together so you and I can have a better understanding of it, so we can implement it in our lives. And obviously, Napoleon Hill's kept his promise. We have this material. Now, Napoleon continues, he says, the book contains the secret after having been put to a practical test by thousands of people in almost every walk of life. So that includes you and I, every walk of life, thousands of people, that doesn't matter. See, it was Carnegie's idea that this formula, which gave him his stupendous fortune, and it was a stupendous fortune. Think about it, hundreds of millions of dollars in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Fast forward today, and you've got billions and billions of dollars, people like Mark Cuban, Elon Musk. If that pronounced his name improperly, I apologize. And it was Carnegie's idea that this fortune, or this secret, this idea, should be placed within reach of the people who don't have the time to investigate how men make money. And it was his hope that Napoleon might test and demonstrate the soundness of the formula through the experience of men and women in every calling. And he believed that this formula should be taught in all the public schools and colleges. And he also expressed the opinion that if it were taught properly, that it would so revolutionize the entire educational system that the time spent in school could be reduced to half. Now, I quit school in the 8th grade. I didn't go through all the way through. My first mentor he just planted the seed that was best for me. But anyway, my children have all gone all the way through school. My wife went all through school and college, and she's been a nurse all her life. And I can tell you what they're talking about here is true. Napoleon continues, and he says Carnegie's experience with people like Schwab and other young men of Schwab's type. I love the way he says that, other young men of Schwab's type. See, that convinced Carnegie that much of that which is taught in the schools is of no value whatsoever in connection with the business of earning a living or accumulating riches. Now, our daughters went through school. They absolutely learned nothing about how to accumulate riches. Nothing. And let's be honest about this. That is still going on today. He wrote this in 1937, ladies and gentlemen. That's still happening today. What the hell are we doing? Now, he had arrived at this decision because he had taken into his business one young man after another, and many of them had but little of that formal education we're talking about. And by coaching them in the use of this particular formula, he developed in them rare leadership, very rare leadership. And moreover, his coaching made fortunes for every one of them that followed his instructions. So if we'll just follow these instructions, that's all we have to do, just follow them. We don't have to analyze it. We don't have to try to figure it out. Just follow it. In the chapter on faith, Napoleon continues. He says in the chapter on faith, we're going to read the story of the astounding, the way they put together the United States Steel Corporation, as it was conceived and carried out by one of the young men through whom Carnegie proved that this formula will work. And here's the key: it will work for all who are ready for it. So how do we get ready for this formula? Well, that's what you're doing by continuing to study this material over and over and over again. You're getting yourself ready. You're preparing yourself to receive the good that you desire, whatever that may be. He said the single application of the secret by the young man, and the guy's named Charles Schwab. Maybe you've heard of Schwab. That made him a huge fortune in both money and opportunity. Roughly speaking, that particular application of this formula, just that one application, was worth approximately $600 million back then. Fast forward to today, and let's take a look at the superstars. They've used this formula. They still continue to use this formula. Any person on the Shark Tank, they use this formula. They may not be fully consciously aware they're using it, but they are. And I know a couple of them on the Shark Tank, they promote the book. Barbara Corcoran was actually in the movie Think and Grow Rich. So we know that this formula still works today, just as it worked back then. Napoleon continues, he says, these facts, and they are facts well known to everyone who knew Carnegie, give you a fair idea of what the reading of this book may bring to you, provided, this is the key, ladies and gentlemen, this is so important, provided you know what it is that you want. If you don't know what you want, how can you ask for it? That's a good question. He says, even before it had undergone 20 years of practical testing, the secret was passed on to 100,000 men and women who used it for their personal benefit, as Mr. Carnegie planned that they should. Some have made fortunes with it. Others have used it successfully in creating harmony in their homes. See, right there, Napoleon's telling us it's not just money. This formula works for everything and anything you want to do. It's not just money. A clergyman used it so effectively that it brought him an income of upwards of $75,000 a year. There was a Cincinnati tailor that used the formula to save his bankrupt business. There was a guy named Stuart Austin Weir of Dallas. He was ready for it. He gave up his profession, studied law. He did more than that. That story is told throughout the book. A gentleman named Jennings Randolph, he got the secret. Who's Jennings Randolph? I don't know. You don't know. But let's fast forward to today. You ever heard of this company called Chick-fil-A? Yeah. You've probably heard of Damon John. I know you've heard of this thing called the Ford Motor Company. I know you've heard of that. And when you flip a light switch on and the light comes on, there's this guy named Edison. Maybe you've heard of him, maybe you haven't. This guy named Edison, he used this. So make sure you understand that it works just as effectively today as it worked then. The Wright brothers, those guys, they created this thing. They figured out how and discovered how to put these pieces of the puzzle together, and we can fly. They used this. Napoleon continues, and he talks about this secret to which he's referring. He says, it's been mentioned no fewer than 100 times throughout the book. He says, it has not been directly named, for it seems to work more successfully when it is merely uncovered and left in sight, where those who are ready and searching for it may pick it up. See, if you're not ready for it, you probably won't find it. Have you ever heard the expression, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear? Well, that's what's going to happen. And that's why Carnegie just kind of tossed it to Napoleon and then sat back. Napoleon continues, he says, if you're ready to put it to use, you will recognize this secret at least once in every chapter. Then he talks about how he wishes he might feel privileged to tell us what it is. But he says that would deprive you of much of the benefit you will receive when you make the discovery in your own way. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to discover it. When we discover it, it's pretty amazing what happens. He talks about while the book was written, his own son, who was then finishing the last year of his college work, he picked up the manuscript of chapter 2. He read it and then discovered the secret for himself. Used the information so effectively that he went into directly into a responsible position at the beginning, salary greater than the average person ever earns. So at the beginning, salary greater than the average person ever earns. He says, when you read his story, perhaps you will dismiss any feeling that you may have had at the beginning of this book that it promised too much. This book doesn't promise too much, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't promise too much at all. We just have to learn to think and grow rich. And most of us have never learned to think. Just because you went to school, just because you have maybe an MBA or a BA or degrees coming off the end of your business card, it doesn't mean you've ever learned how we think. And that's critical if we truly want to create the life of our desires. It says the secret was extensively used by President Woodrow Wilson during the World War. He says it was passed on to every soldier who fought in the war, carefully wrapped up in the training that they received prior to going to the war. Talks about a peculiar thing about the secret is that those who once acquire it and use it find themselves literally swept on to success with but little effort, and they never again submit to failure. He says, if you doubt this, just study the names of those who have used it, wherever they have been mentioned. Check their records for yourself, and you'll be convinced. Now, he also makes it very, very clear here that his words, there is no such thing as something for nothing. He says, the secret to which I refer cannot be had without a price, although the price is far less than its value. It cannot be had at any price by those who are not intentionally searching for it. Intentionally searching for it. He says it cannot be given away. It cannot be purchased for money. And one of the reasons it can't be purchased is that it comes in two parts. He says one part is already in possession of those who are ready for it. He says the secret serves equally well all who are ready for it. And this next sentence gave me hope, ladies and gentlemen. He said, it says education has nothing to do with it. Well, a kid that quit school in the 8th grade, didn't even graduate the 8th grade, I had certainly built a pretty healthy self-inferiority complex. And then I read this, education has nothing to do with it? Huh? Really? Yeah, it says long before I was born, back to Napoleon Hill, long before I was born, the secret made its way into possession of Thomas Edison. Well, we know Thomas Edison used it. Now, once again, for those that may not be familiar with Thomas Edison and his life and everything like that, understand that this guy was one of the leading inventors of all time. And he had but 3 months of what we call formal schooling, 3 months. Okay? So we have to get this thing about formal education right. And I'm not saying kids shouldn't go to school, but they should be there learning to learn. And the biggest problem I see, well, never mind. But a lot of the kids are bored. You got to get a little bit faster pace, maybe. But anyway, it says the secret was passed on to a business associate of Edison, and he used it so effectively that although he was only making 12 grand a year at the time, he accumulated a great fortune. You'll find his story at the beginning of the first chapter. Give you a little clue. It's a guy named Edwin Barnes. He says, it should convince you that riches are not beyond your reach. Riches are never beyond our reach, ladies and gentlemen, never. No how, no way. They're right within your reach. As a matter of fact, you're probably standing in the middle of them. What we have to learn to do is bend over and pick them up. Yeah. Napoleon says, how do I know these things? Well, you should have the answer before you finish the book. You may find it in the very first chapter or on the last page. He says, well, I was performing the 20-year task of research. 20 years. Now think about it. He worked for 20 years to organize this philosophy of success. And that was in the 1920s when he put out this other book, this one here, called The Law of Success. Now, he put out The Law of Success in the 1920s, and he came out with Think and Grow Rich in the 1930s. That's another Law of Success book and one to come with me. So when he talks about 20 plus years of research, that's when he put that out. He had another 12 years of research and 12 years of interviews and 12 years of growing and 12 years of evolution and 12 years of better understanding. He had all of that going for him when he wrote Think and Grow Rich. So while I was performing the 20-year task of research, which I had undertaken at Mr. Carnegie's request, I analyzed hundreds of well-known men, many of them who had admitted that they accumulated their vast fortunes through the aid of the Carnegie secret. And these men were. Now, some of them you may not recognize their names. I don't even know their names. I'm 57. I might be talking to you and you're 27. You're not going to know who the heck these people are. But my bet is you know who Henry Ford is, the Ford Motor Company. My bet is you've heard of the Wrigley chewing gum empire, William Wrigley. Well, William Wrigley claims to be the very first student of this philosophy after Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich. My bet is you've heard of the Kodak Company. Maybe not. The guy's name was George Eastman. My bet is you've heard of Wilbur Wright, Orville and Wilbur Wright, the first men of flight. Everybody was so, they'll never get that thing off the ground. They'll never get that thing off the ground. They'll never fly. And then it actually flew. So what they do then, negative Nellies of the world, well, it only stayed up for 17 seconds. Yeah, how long does it stay up there now? As long as we want. But anyway, fast forward once again, and you have the Mark Cubans of the world. You have the Truett Cathys of the world, Chick-fil-A. You have Damon John. You have Barbara Corcoran. We could go on and on and on of people who use this book so they can continue to think and grow rich. This is just a small mention of the names. If you've ever heard of the Woolworth Company, that guy was blasted because you'll never build a company based on a 5-cent and a 10-cent sale. He built an empire based on that. Napoleon says these names that he's listed here represent but a small fraction of the hundreds of well-known Americans whose achievements have been just absolutely off the charts. Off the charts. Excuse me. And as far as schooling goes, many of these men had but very little, if any. One of these guys told Napoleon that what little schooling he did had, he acquired in a very much the same manner as a modern locomotive takes on water, by scooping it up as they run. See, he was in action, he was in motion, he was doing things. He wasn't sitting around procrastinating, figuring it out. See, I gotta wait until this is perfect, that's perfect, and this is perfect. Now, Joel will appreciate what I just said there. That's what I was doing. But that's not what these guys were doing. Ford, Henry Ford, the guy that started the Ford Motor Company. Everybody knows who the Ford Motor Company is. One guy, one idea started that whole thing. He never reached high school, let alone college, but he did pretty well. Now, Napoleon goes on, he says, I am not attempting to minimize the value of schooling, but I am trying to express my earnest belief that those who master and apply the secret will reach high stations, accumulate riches, and bargain with life on their own terms, even if their schooling has been meager. He says, somewhere as you read, the secret to which I refer will jump from the page and stand boldly before you if you are ready for it. When it appears, you will recognize it. Whether you receive the sign in the first or the last chapter, stop for a moment. When it presents itself, Napoleon tells them, turn down a glass. The hell does that mean? I don't know. But that occasion will mark the most important turning point in your life. I would say stop for a minute and realize what just happened. And maybe that's what he's saying. He says, we pass now to chapter 1, into the story of my very dear friend who has generously acknowledged having seen the mystic sign and whose business achievements are evidence enough that he discovered the secret. Napoleon says that he turned down a glass. He says, as you read his story and the others, remember that they deal with the important problems of life, such as all men experience. The problems arising from one's endeavor to earn a living, to find hope, courage, contentment, and peace of mind. Hope, courage, contentment, and peace of mind. To accumulate riches and to enjoy freedom of body and spirit. Freedom. Without money, you have no freedom. I'm not saying money is the only sign of wealth, but without it, you don't have any freedom. He says, remember too, as you go through the book, that it deals with fact and not fiction. Its purpose being to convey a great universal truth through which all who are ready may learn not only what to do, but also how to do it, and receive as well the needed stimulus to make a start. The start is what stops most people. Get started, it stops most people. He says, as a final word of preparation, before you begin the first chapter, may I offer one brief suggestion which may provide a clue by which the Carnegie secret may be recognized. He says, it is this: all achievement, all earned riches have their beginning in an idea. If you are ready for the secret, you already possess one half of it. Therefore, you will readily recognize the other half the moment it reaches your mind. Ladies and gentlemen, I can only assure you that Napoleon Hill has not promised too much from this book. Not at all. If anything, he has under-promised dramatically. And you can only experience that through your own life, through your own study. And once again, I want to say thank you, Joe. Thanks, Joe. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, this day is what we desire to be the very best day in this game we call life. Today. Yesterday doesn't matter, tomorrow isn't here, but today can be the very best day we've ever experienced if we allow it to be, if we decide that it will be. So allow this day to be the best day you've ever experienced in this game we call life. And tonight when you put your head on the pillow, please do so with a mind full of peace. Remember, calmness of mind is one of the beautiful jewels of wisdom. And may God bless each and every one of you. Have a fabulous day.